Welcome to What's in a Game. On today's show, we're breaking down the Nuggets roster, talking about what this team does well and what they can do to maximize what they have. And in particular, how Christian Brown has been making the most of his opportunities this year. But first, we're going to take a look at the new look teams in the NBA following the trade deadline. Have new challengers emerged? Finally, CT and I will share our two truths and a lie that we told ourselves before the season started. Stay tuned. Welcome back to What's in a Game. I'm Grace Jean here with our guest. At this point, you've got to be the best friend of the pod, CT. How are you doing today?
Hey, Grace and Will, how you guys doing? Thanks for the kind introduction. Appreciate it. You guys doing a great job with the podcast. So happy to be back and talking Nuggets and NBA with you guys.
Yeah, we appreciate having you on. Is this your fourth or fifth time on the pod? Really appreciate you. You always have a lot to say. We love having you on.
Appreciate it.
Just a couple of quick programming notes. The plan after today's show is to reconvene after the back-to-back from hell at Oklahoma City. That's March 9th and 10th. I know a lot of people have been hyping up those games as potentially, I guess, in Jamal Murray's mind, having big seeding implications as he's talked about wanting to chase the 1 seed this season. But also potential implications for the MVP race. But in the meantime, please do us a favor and hit the like and subscribe button. It really helps us out with the algorithm as we try to grow the channel. All right, let's start with the news. Big news last week that we got on, I believe it was Wednesday, in the middle of my vacation. Victor Wembanyama is most likely out for the season with a blood clotting issue. I think they said it was deep vein thrombosis in his shoulder. I think this basically means the Spurs are done for the season, and they were kind of already lagging a bit heading into the All-Star break. So basically after they played us, those 2 games, they started to peter out, but they took one on the way out. Took one off of us on the way out. I thought that was pretty unfortunate timing for Chris Paul, actually, who probably, it's literally right after the trade deadline, right after All-Star break where they find this out. And he probably could have found a home on a contender to try another, round of ring chasing. But who knows what he would have wanted to do if given, that option. I know his contract, we talked about it over the offseason. He's on I think just under $11 million a year. It's just on the MLE to have like the broadest range of teams that could have not even traded for him, but bought him out. So actually, since he could still be a buyout candidate this season, CT, do you think that Chris Paul will want to stay on the Spurs in their current form and just like keep playing with, he could stay with them and play with Wemby next year? Or do you think he will want to try to move himself to a contender within the next couple of weeks, basically during the buyout period?
I think it's possible, especially now that Victor is out for the year. Because that seemed to be like his sole goal, was to try to help out, Victor and try to, ramp up his development, especially offensively. Now with him out, kind of defeats the purpose of why he joined the team. He wanted to get them to the playoffs. And, I know Fox is there now as well. So that kind of also, impedes that a little bit too. So
yeah, more ball handling.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised.
And you've got kind of a glut there with Fox, CP3, Castle, and Giselle. And Keldon Johnson is still on that team also.
Yeah, I know Popovich is out too. So that was kind of another reason for Paul to go there too. So I wouldn't be surprised if he, wants to get a buyout. But I don't know. I would probably lean that he stays and just rides it out to the end.
Yeah, it's interesting because I was mostly thinking about a trade scenario, but literally as I was, talking about it, I realized I guess he could still just be bought out. And that actually makes it even easier for any other team to acquire him if they wanted somebody. I do think that it's also, we mentioned Fox and the kind of sudden glut that they have of ball handling and in particular kind of shot creation reps that kind of need to go around. And now Fox is on a team that is definitively worse than his previous squad, but it also presents an opportunity for him to grow some chemistry with the non-Wemby players on that team if he's going to be there more long term. With Wemby out, do you think it's going to be more difficult for the Spurs organization to evaluate the young players on this team and their long-term potential in this iteration of the squad with Vic, since he's obviously not going to be there? Or is it more about just evaluating them overall as players, and that's what they're going to try to do? But do you think that impedes their ability to, just get those, just be able to analyze the reps, with Vic and that fit?
Yeah, I think a little bit of both. Because I think individually you can kind of, gauge some of the guys that they have, and Vassell and Castle and Fox now in the mix as well. And Fox was, brought in to buy Wemby and play alongside him, and now he's kind of running the show himself. But I mean, I'd probably say a little bit of both. I think there's probably a large sample size already of Wemby playing alongside Vassell, and Castle this year is probably around like 45 or so games around there, maybe a little more between those guys. So that's a decent sample. It's like half a season, or close to it. So it's like, I would say probably they have enough evidence, but I think individually now is more of a time to see, what those guys can do.
Yeah. Are these guys going to be like starting caliber guys, or maybe we'll keep them on the bench, or are they, going to be traded at some point? I'm really surprised that Keldon Johnson's still on that team, actually. I thought that they were going to trade him over the summer. So I'm surprised that they kept him through the deadline, even in the course of acquiring De'Aaron Fox, when you think about it. The Spurs are definitely going to continue to fall in the standings. They're 3-7 in their last 10. And I think last I checked, they're in a dogfight with the New Orleans Pelicans. I think we're down in that game, actually. We're recording this in the middle of some Tuesday night action. Another team in the West playoff race that is definitely going to benefit from this is the Golden State Warriors, who now have Jimmy Butler. They've gone, I believe it's 5-1 since they got Jimmy. What do you think is the highest you could see them finishing in the standings, given that they're 3 games above 500 now, sitting in the 9 seed? When they got Jimmy, I believe they were in the 11 seed, right? But the Suns have continued to fall. Obviously, the Spurs are falling. The Kings are now at least slightly worse without Fox. The teams above them are still pretty strong. So how much higher do you think the Warriors could actually climb in the standings?
I think quite a bit. Just look at the standings now. They're a game below the Clippers. I'm not sure of the tiebreaker scenario with them, but I think the Warriors could probably, rise up to 6 at least, definitely get out of the play-in. I would be shocked if they could catch the Rockets, but it seems like they're kind of in free fall now as well.
They are in serious free fall. Yeah, I have no idea what happened to them in the middle of January, but they just think Matt Moore he uses this phrase, all their pets' heads fell off. And like the whole thing,
Definitely had a hot start to the year, I think, and kind of
the Warriors tiebreaker situation with the Clippers is very bad because they are 0-3 against the Clippers this season.
I mean, they could win it outright. They might not even tiebreaker. So, if they're playing like this still, I wouldn't be surprised if they get all the way up to the 6th seed.
Their offense has been looking a lot better. Everyone's pointing out, like, hey, Steph can be like Steph Curry again when he doesn't have to do literally everything, which that's scary because I kind of was banking on Steph looking slightly washed to be able to hold that team down. But he has been looking spry. He's been able to spring loose a lot easier with some defensive attention going to literally anyone else on the floor. And in this case, it is Jimmy Butler. I see them as a bigger playoff threat against some of the other vulnerable teams in a playoff setting. I'm not really worried about the Warriors for the Nuggets. I mean, our defense sucks, so they're going to be able to score, but I'm not worried about being able to score on them. But I would worry if I were obviously if it was like a Houston Rockets, if it managed to be like a 4-5 Warriors Rockets. I think that's lights out for Houston because that's always been a bad matchup for them. Even when the Warriors were bad, for some reason, they always played Houston really well. And Houston has obviously been in this free fall as well. Wonder if they're going to be able to catch the rope at any point this season. Let's talk about some of the more real contenders for teams that we actually think have a chance at winning it all. Oklahoma City Thunder didn't really do anything at the deadline. They did some money not really a cash grab. They let the Pelicans get under the luxury tax and collected some more second round picks to do something with Daniel Tice, but they didn't really make any moves to add to their roster. But their big trade deadline acquisition was Chet Holmgren. Another big move that a lot of people were talking about at the deadline was the Cleveland Cavaliers acquiring DeAndre Hunter, trading Karis LeVert in the process to upgrade that basically backup wing spot. I wasn't sure if they were going to be starting Hunter or not. Seems like they really want to keep bringing him off the bench to improve their wing depth. But obviously, they're in the Eastern Conference. I wanted to know which of those two things you think is going to end up being a more impactful acquisition, in quotes, because the Thunder already had Chet, but he's like getting healthy and getting back on the floor, is going to be a bigger factor in the title race.
I would say Chet. I was pretty vocal on Twitter about my DeAndre Hunter stance for the Nuggets. MPJ.
What was your stance? Oh, yeah, right.
I mean, I just thought that Mike was better for the Nuggets, I'll say. Better for the Nuggets and him fitting what Jokic likes to do and how he plays. I think Hunter's a good player. I think he's having a good year as well. I think he's going to help the Cavaliers' wing depth because they don't have
wings.
Yeah, and that's why I still think Boston's going to beat them in a playoff series because I think they have a very dominant series against them when it comes down to it. That's why I'm still a bit skeptical about the Cavs getting all the way to the finals. But I would go Chet. I think Chet, all defensive type player. His offense is really versatile as well. Him and Hartenstein together is a pretty dynamic front court duo when it comes to the defense. And I think they were missing Chet's all around versatility, I think, on both ends of the floor. So I'd probably go Chet, even though they were out. He was out for a while. But when it comes to like a measuring stick of the moves, I would say Chet. I think just overall, obviously, he's a better player than Hunt.
Yeah, substantially, right? And so the question is like, why even bring up that comparison? And I think the answer is still Chet, but I think it's worth it to consider what it means for Cleveland to just have another wing, a two-way wing, frankly, because they don't really have another two-way wing. You have Dean Wade, who's kind of like a Christian Brown type for them. They have a Coro as well, who's more like defensive oriented. And then they had Karis LeVert, who was all offense, and Strus, who he's playmaking, but the shooting is like very touch and go. The defense is not what you need it to be from that position to compete at the level that Cleveland wants to compete at. So that one of the reasons I find it interesting that they're even bringing Hunter off the bench, because I think he's the best one of all of the wings I just talked about that is still on their team. But they're in the Eastern Conference, and I don't think they can beat Boston in a series if Boston is healthy. But I do think they can beat everybody else. And who knows if maybe Boston gets taken out by somebody else. Whereas with the Thunder, I do think that without Chet, they were substantially more vulnerable in a playoff setting. But I don't know that bringing Chet back solves the bulk of the very few issues, let's say, that they actually have in terms of vulnerabilities in a playoff setting. Whereas I think Hunter addresses about 50% of what Cleveland needed. The other 50% would be like Darius Garland needs to play better against teams like the Celtics than he does, because he's the key to that team. Is Chet coming back for OKC or Luka getting traded to the Lakers a more impactful move in the title race?
I mean, if we're talking player for player, I mean, Luka's obviously, way better. I'll say
in the 2025 title race, though.
Oh, the 25 title race. Okay, now I would go Chet. If we're talking about if we're talking a year from now, I would probably say Luka. Just because then
really, you think OKC's not going to be like this good again next year, or you think the Lakers will just be better?
I do. I think the Lakers will be a lot better. I'm not like higher than most on the Lakers. I think they're a pretty flawed team still. And Chet obviously is a major cog in what OKC is doing. But I think just having a player like Luka, I think that just elevates them pretty high. And again, I think with LeBron, if he's going to be retiring next year, like close to it, then that's when could the Lakers land somebody else? I mean, it's also a question of uncertainty as well. Of who else could join the Knicks in LA if LeBron or if he's gone, from the team. But now that I think about it, I'll probably go Chet. for now.
I mean, I thought you were saying that you think that the new look Lakers could beat OKC in a series.
Think they have a chance. I think they have a chance.
Really?
I think they have a chance. Luka has gone off, I think, a lot against OKC and some of the games that they've played.
That's more about like other Mavs. Well, Luka's no longer a Mav, but I actually think OKC plays Luka pretty well compared to like most teams.
I mean, my matchup for OKC that I think, aside from the Nuggets, would be the Wolves. You know, they won the other night. Not to have any recency bias, but I just think that the Wolves have a good combination of players to kind of stymie what OKC does. And again, OKC is a juggernaut for the regular season, but I think in the playoffs, I think they have a lot more questions than what the public has, been saying over the past.
The public NBA Twitter. Yeah, I think a lot of people. There's this thing with OKC where if you criticize anything about them, it kind of gets dismissed as like, oh, it's because of their youth and their inexperience and like whatever. I really wasn't even worried about that last year. And I'm not even sure that inexperience is like the main problem. Like they had specific basketball issues. This year, I think, is interesting because I think they have the same issues. Will and I have talked about them on the show. Basically, I think that they are lacking in secondary shot creation, particularly off the bounce. I think they need a better slasher than they've had. J-Dub hasn't really been that at a high level consistently. However, what they did over the summer was lean into their strengths. They got even better defensively. They got guys that could help them generate even more steals to the point where it might not matter that they don't have, that other stuff on offense to act as a complement to Shea, because when your defense is that good, it takes a hell of a lot of pressure off of your offense to the point where you can win games, incredibly ugly games. And it feels like they can make games really ugly for everybody. And you might not even be able to make it ugly for them because Shea, is having a banner year. It's the reason that he's leading in the MVP race right now. And he was pretty good in the playoffs last year. Like he had a couple of rough games, but he usually bounced back. He was really like, I think his game lends itself to being able to counter different defenses well in terms of like maintaining like his scoring at least. But I do think they still have issues. And if a team ends up being able to, exploit those things having nothing to do with the youth or the inexperience of that roster, but just like the pure basketball stuff, I think it would be an incredibly impressive feat because they are so good at the thing that they are good at. CT, you are a big fan of the New York Knicks, are you not?
Since I'm from the area, I will say that I am.
You'll cop to it. Can't back off now.
I am a Nuggets fan first and foremost, but my East team would be the Knicks, I'll say. Yes.
Why didn't the Knicks do anything at the trade deadline? Because it seems like we've been talking about the Nuggets depth all year long, but the Knicks seem to have an even bigger depth issue, and it shows even more apparently in the minutes charts for their starters. And all they did at the deadline, I believe, was trade Jericho Sims to the Bucks. Why didn't they do anything at the deadline? And what would you have liked to see them acquire? Like what kind of player do you think they could have used to help kind of spark them a little bit? Because they've been kind of in a little bit of a mini slump as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, I'd like the Cat trade for them. I think that he's been a really dynamic player on offense, and defensively he's had to play a lot of center because Mitchell Robinson's been out. So he's been a bit exposed on that end of the floor. They don't really have a capable big that you can play alongside him. Like in Minnesota, he was playing with, Nas Reed. He was playing with Rudy Gobert. He was able to kind of hide a bit. Even the perimeter defenders were way better in Minnesota than in New York. And I think for me, the big move, and a lot of my friends say the same thing, the move that really sunk them, I think, was the Bridges trade. That was the move where they really expanded all of their assets, or most, I'll say. What was it, 4 first-round picks? 5 first-round picks to go to the Nets.
And pick swaps.
Yep, so the Nets made out really well in that deal. And that was a move, obviously, that was driven by Brunson. I mean, there's no doubt about it that he had a say in the move for sure. And I just think that they really tried. It's pretty funny, too, because you see teams that really have like a lot of excess assets to use, and they just go for that one move that they think is going to be the move, right? And the Knicks thought that the move to help them get over the top. And I just have thought that Bridges has been pretty overrated as a player since the Suns' finals run. Defensively, I think his defense has slipped dramatically over the past couple of years. I think on offense, he's a third option, second option, and I just don't think that's enough to win a title.
Second is generous.
Yeah,
Third might be generous too.
with Cade, he's definitely down the pecking order for sure.
Yeah.
Defensively, so. But I just think as far as the move that you were going to make for the Knicks, that I like I said, I like the Karl Towns move. Thought it was a really good move. The Bridges trade, I just thought that was something where you had all these assets, right? And you went for that move. And I think it's kind of sinking them at the moment.
To your point about Cat at center, yesterday, I believe it was, Hibbs had a post-game press conference basically expounding on the fact that they were, quote, without their starting center for over 50 games. Pretty much acknowledging that, if he had Mitchell Robinson, like Cat would not be the one playing five. Like Cat would be on the floor probably, but he sees Cat as more of a four than a center. The defensive numbers kind of tell the tale there. He continues to be one of the worst rim protectors in the league. It doesn't help that the POA is not great on that Knicks team outside of OG Anunoby. It's just not something that Mikhail has been able to do, like fight over a screen. It's funny because it feels like the Knicks are just Nuggets East. Like they're having a lot of the same problems that Denver has been facing this season, just looks a little bit different, and they happen to not have the best player in the world. The last big move that I kind of have to get your thoughts on here. We alluded to it a little bit with the Lakers trade, but do you think that Rob Pelinka should win Executive of the Year for fleecing Nico Harrison in that deal?
No, he got gift wrapped. There was some collusion going on that we don't know about.
It's insane. And it's like, look, Luka, he was coming back from injury. He was struggling for most of the first few games that he's played with the Lakers. Of course, he has his get right game against the Nuggets because our defense is what it is right now. Watching that game, I was like, oh, okay. This is finally when everybody drops the whole act of like, maybe Nico was right about Luka. He's an incredible player. And yeah, now the Lakers have him. And just kind of harkening back to our previous conversation about how important the Luka acquisition could be to this year's title race. I'm not ready to waver yet on my stance that I don't really see the Lakers as true contenders this season, which, well, what does that say about the Nuggets if they got blown out by the Lakers? Well, the Nuggets played like shit in that game, but they did look really good. Let's say the Lakers got lucky and someone else took out OKC. Let's say OKC in a hypothetical world goes out in round one. Where would you put the Lakers in a list in terms of teams that are in position to take advantage of that opportunity to win the West?
I mean, OKC, you have to give them the benefit of the doubt for the regular season. So obviously them at 1. I think the Nuggets are right there at 2, despite everything that's gone on. I still think they're a formidable threat. 3, that's where it gets kind of dicey now because I'm not a big believer in Houston. The Grizzlies, I think, are a good team. I just think they have some playoff flaws that I think are going to be kind of I wouldn't say exposed, but I think more amplified as we get into the playoffs, especially Ja. I don't think he's been, his best self this year when it comes to the encore production. And then after that, it's tough.
Yeah, that's the thing is like, I could quote unquote not think the Lakers are contenders, but it's like, well, let's look at the field.
Right.
And then it's like, well, they're probably better than most of these other teams.
I think 3 is the ceiling, probably, I would say.
What if the next time they meet the Nuggets, they blow them out again with time to prepare and game plan and all of that? Would you move them up to 2?
I need to rant about that game.
Okay, we're gonna get to it. Save the rant.
Yeah, I would be shocked if the Nuggets get blown out the next game because I think Malone's going to counter and adjust. I don't think they have a solve for Jokic like some videos I saw out there on.
Ben Taylor had his how a podcaster solved Nikola Jokic. Was that literally the title? I love thinking basketball. I still need to watch that video, but I found the thumbnail to be very funny. And I think he knew exactly what he was doing.
Jokic fans were happy seeing that on the timeline. But yeah, I think with the Nuggets still, I would still take Denver over the Lakers. I mean, I think the Lakers actually have added pieces that match up better than the last couple of years. Getting off of Russell's contract was something that was a big move for them against the Nuggets, I think, because the Nuggets were able to take advantage.
D'Lo, you mean?
D'Lo, yeah, of the
Not Russell. Okay. They had two different Russells in the last like 3 years. So just clarifying.
Yeah.
Because we have that Russ now.
Yep, and they've added a couple more wings too. Finney Smith. They have Rui as well. He's just playing really well too.
He is playing really well.
Yep. So they have guys. I think where the Nuggets are concerned, MPJ was a big matchup nightmare for them, and I think now that's I wouldn't say that's over. I would just say that that's a bit less of an advantage than the Nuggets had.
How a podcaster solved Michael Porter Jr. What's that?
I said the jokes write themselves.
Yeah, dude, that team is literally made for television. It's crazy. All right, so let's move on to the Denver Nuggets. This segment is about the roster, obviously, because they didn't do anything at the trade deadline. Like, literally zero. Last year, at least they traded Kavagate's draft rights for cash, I think was the one move they did. But the first thing I want to talk about is backup center. After the trade deadline on whatever day that was, Calvin Booth decided to do an impromptu press conference before the Nuggets played, I think it was the Orlando Magic at home, actually. And he actually revealed a couple of things to us about the front office's approach to the trade deadline. One is they were not planning on shaking up or adding anything to the main rotation, well, according to Calvin, but were instead shopping guys like Dario and Zeke and those end of bench guys to try to upgrade the backup big position, backup center in particular. DeAndre Jordan was, quote, long in the tooth. These are Calvin's words, not mine. And they tried to go after Valanciunas, but Sacramento was able to beat their offer just because of the assets that they had at their disposal, or lack of assets that they had at their disposal. The Nuggets did. Calvin kind of made a whole show of the fact that the last couple of years they were kind of constantly like going to the bank, I guess, to acquire credit in the form of like current draft picks and trading future draft picks. But now the bill has come due and they don't really have the assets to make moves, or at least beat other teams' offers to make those moves. I found that interesting because he talked about it very passively, and it was kind of like, well, somehow we ended up in this position where we don't have any assets. It was very like the we're all trying to find the guy that did this meme, the guy in the hot dog suit. But when it comes to the backup center search in particular, how did you feel about them saying that they were trying to prioritize finding a backup center specifically for the regular season? That's basically what Calvin said, instead of another position that's more likely to play big minutes in the playoffs, especially because in that same press conference, Calvin said, ooh, I'm not sure Julian's going to be able to make it defensively in the playoffs, but he's one of our top 8 right now.
Right. Yeah, I thought some of his comments were shocking to hear, especially like trying to move Zeke and Dario, and the Strawler comment as well. I mean, it's true.
Just don't usually expect to hear it from the GM that drafted him and presumably didn't re-sign a guy like Justin Holiday so that Julian would get more minutes this year, etc.
Right. And I think, with the backup center slot, I mean, DeAndre has played as well as anyone could have hoped this year.
Yeah.
And his skill set is valuable, especially playing beside, you can play beside Mike, you can play him beside AG, even, playing beside your favorite player, Zeke Naji. Some combinations have been more versatile than others. If they could have gotten at least, DeAndre's at the tail end of his career. So trying to get any other center that is a, rim roller, has some gravity, could block shots and rebound would be beneficial to the team in the regular season and the playoffs. So I think Jamal plays better with those kind of guys off the bench, especially I think at this juncture where you kind of need that gravity. So
I don't know who would have been like actually available besides like Robert Williams III. I'm surprised Portland didn't move him at the deadline unless they were adamant about getting a first round pick, which I don't think anybody was willing to do because of the injury history and the injury current. Frankly, he's barely played this season as well. But other than him, Nick Claxton, who's, making $25 million a year, there really aren't, like, that's a pretty rare archetype, at least in like a good player. I guess Day'Ron Sharp is another one, although his rim finishing has been an issue this year and he also has an injury history. But it's funny because the, basic pick and roll big who can, catch lobs and protect the rim some. You'd think that it'd be a more common archetype, but there aren't actually that many that are, well, actually good. Dallas has 3 of them now. Which is hilarious. They basically have like Pokemon evolutions of rim rollers from Daniel Gafford to Derek Lively to Anthony Davis. Another thing that Calvin said during his press conference related to that backup center position is something that he's, quote, known for a while is that Zeke is a 4. Now, at the time that Calvin did this press conference, at the trade deadline, I think Zeke had played a couple of games filling in for Peyton Watson, who had gotten injured. I think it was during the Knicks game. It was either the Knicks game or the Bulls game. Injured his knee and he's still out right now. What was your reaction to that comment about Zeke being a power forward, which seemed to be directed at Malone and the coaching staff's use of Zeke when the front office are the ones who were responsible for signing Zeke to his extension the same year that the only backup center that was on the roster was DJ?
Yeah, I think definitely surprising to hear that. I think with Najee, I think a lot of the context that fans are missing when it comes to the Najee discussion is that he had to move to the 5 because his jump shot abandoned him.
Yeah, that's enough.
Why to the 5? He was a good shooter coming into the league as far as his first year. I mean, not coming out of Arizona. That first year, that second year, I think he shot like 30s, like something or above percent from 3. Like he's pretty good. It wasn't like a huge amount of volume or
Right, very low volume.
Right, but his jump shot looked really good mechanically, and he was moving more.
Well, hang on. No, it didn't. He had possibly
Not
one
to
of the
the.
jankiest mechanics in the league at that point,
It was
but it
going
was going in.
right. It was going.
Okay. I just want to clarify that.
It wasn't a nice jump shot, but yeah. So that's why he moved more toward the 4. Coming out in Arizona, he was when I was scouting him, he was a 5. He was playing the 5 at Arizona as a rim roller, a lob threat. He had a mid-range jump shot, but he was not shooting threes. He was not shooting pick and pops. He was not attacking bigs off the dribble or attacking closeouts. And again, the staff made him bulk up, and he moved on to the 5. And again, that year where he was the championship year, he played pretty well next to Vlatko in the front court, and even beside Jeff, like he played decently at the 5. Then it was the year after, which I think was a lot of the context with who he was playing with, as why it didn't end well that year, last year. But also too, Zeke was not playing at a level that was rotation caliber for a contender. So I think that's partially some of the context for it. I think that's where fans are kind of missing that part of the discussion. But he's looked much better at the 4 as of late. I mean, that's for sure. I mean, you have to give him credit.
He's finishing stuff at the rim, which every time it happens, I'm like, it's not pretty. He has been, I think he's shooting like 56% on 2s, basically, since he got moved to the 4, which, is big. And he's been shooting slightly above league average on a low volume of 3-point shots as well. The misses are also very ugly. So it's not like we're saying he's a shooter, but he's been playing better. The thing is, like, those things on offense are really important for him. Like just being able to finish at the rim is big because he's going to be getting dump off passes and whatnot. I'm always scared when he does, especially in even a slightly crowded paint. But to his credit, he's been able to, finish those things lately, which allows him to stay on the floor and do what he does defensively. And he's been, I think, doing an admirable job filling in for Peyton Watson, who is the only other like big-ish defensive wing that we have on the roster. So we really needed Zeke to play and fill in that role, and he's done a really good job to this point. I didn't really understand those comments. In particular, I've something I've known for a while. So I'm like, you built this roster, dude. Like, but continuing on the conversation of backup center, the AG at center looks are something that Malone has gone to in the playoffs for the last 2 years. To varying degrees of success. They were very successful in 2023. They were very successful last season, even up until, I keep going back to this, the non-Jokic minutes were very good in the Wolves series until Chris Finch started mirroring Rudy's minutes with AG, that's just a tough matchup, right? And Rudy's a really good player, and he makes the other players on that team better. So that was just tough after game 5 in that series. But it was something that they could go to in the playoffs to spell Jokic. This season, they've gone to the AG at center looks pretty sparingly, understandably, because AG has been coming back from calf injury, and he also hasn't looked quite like himself. He's starting to get better, but it's been a very gradual, journey in that sense, trying to get him back into tip-top shape. But we have a limited sample of AG at center, about 150 possessions. When AG's on the floor without Jokic, Dario, or DJ, it's a minus 14.4 net, which is really bad. That's like what you'd expect in non-Jokic minutes in the past. And, not that non-Jokic minutes have been amazing this season, but they have been a little bit better this year with DJ on the floor. They've been only minus 4.7 net when it's AG at center without Zeke there. So that's like AG and Zeke both being there kind of muddles the data a little bit. So you're like, I don't know who's playing center. I don't know if it matters for how we're looking at the data. But the point is here, has the AG at center look gotten stale? And will the front office basically regret not getting a real backup big that actually possibly would have been needed in the playoffs?
I'd say maybe, or I'd say not determined at the moment.
Do you think it's just sample size?
I do. I think it's a little bit sample size, and I also think that AG played hurt a bit when he was playing those.
Yeah.
So we're seeing the full scope that AG's defense, I think, this year has slipped a bit. I think that's due to the health. You haven't been able to switch him 5 out really a lot of the time. Anytime he's been on a guard, for the most part, I think he's gotten cooked a lot of the times, and that goes for everybody. That's just not AG. Anybody else on a guard, they've gotten cooked up and down the roster. So I don't think it's gotten stale, but I do think that there's some elements of it that have kind of lost its effectiveness. I think KCP.
Like what?
I think KCP going Orlando has kind of been a big factor in that as well. I think that playing like Watson and Brown next to him is kind of tough because you have guys who aren't spacers. I'm curious how many minutes that happened with Russ on the floor with AG too.
It's such a small sample size with him at center, and it's actually quite a number of different lineups that it's hard to really glean anything from slicing it even further. But I'm curious how much more we're going to see it. We saw it a bit against the Lakers,
right?
Actually, on Saturday, and that's when the game got out of hand. Was when those lineups came in the first half. When DJ played at backup, it actually wasn't that bad. I think it was just I think he was like a -4 in that first stint, which is like very manageable, in the grand scheme of things. But obviously the Lakers lead ballooned to 20 points while those AG at center looks were on the floor. So those, haven't been as effective this year. Now, we don't really have a big sample of it, even in 2023, because Malone really didn't even go to it before the playoffs that year.
Right.
So our sample size for it on the whole are actually quite small, even if you combined all the years, because it's literally just the playoffs with a shortened rotation even around AG. Like you're talking about, like, okay, well, KCP's out. We have fewer, good players taking up the minutes, around him. but obviously you shorten your rotation in the playoffs, so kind of get around that a bit. And then last season, Malone went to it more than he had in the previous regular season, but it really wasn't until like the second half of the year, or it'd be like for very short stints in like the second halves of games. That's definitely something that I will want to monitor, because one of the looks I definitely expect them to go to at some point in the playoffs is Jamal and Russ with AG. And I don't know who the other two players will be around that trio. But if you're going to play Russ without Jokic, Jamal has to be there. And if Jokic isn't there, obviously AG will be if he's playing the backup five. So that's definitely something I'm very curious how Malone's going to manage and try to tinker with in order to find, optimal combinations, because I am worried about the lack of an ability to play like a real double big look. And if like we're talking about like, well, Zeke has looked okay at the four. But the Zeke with AG lineups have been even worse, at least so far. So I'm curious if they just experiment with that more. Will and I have been talking about lineup data all season long, and a lot of things can shift when you just get a bigger sample size, right? So, who knows if this actually holds
Yeah, I think DJ has to play. I don't know about
in
playoff
the
minutes.
playoffs. Well, okay, yeah.
I think in round one, I would go to it and see how he does. But I do think that I've been stressing all year. I think Malone has done a good job of experimenting a lot with his lineups. And I think he's got to keep experimenting and pushing the bounds of the roster. I've been pretty vocal about seeing Peyton Watson at the five as well, even though it's a small look. I think Watson brings qualities to the table that can facilitate and help Murray at guard running pick and rolls, because you look at DJ, right? He has limitations as a short roll player. He can't finish.
He did have that one lob to P-Watt the one time, but
Right.
but there are also a lot of record scratch possessions where he catches the ball in the middle of the floor, for sure.
Because if Jamal, a lot of the time in the playoffs, I'll guarantee it, we've seen it in the past as well, Jamal gets doubled in pick and rolls with the bench. And then Jay as your short roll man, right? And he can't operate all three levels of the short roll. He can catch lobs and he can pass, but he can't score out of it as far as from the free throw line and below.
Well, that's another situation where I think it will be advantageous actually to play Russ with Jamal in those non-Jokic minutes as well, to have somebody else who can initiate an attack and attack off the second side if they're if they're doubling Jamal. So yeah, this team continues to be an interesting story, an enigma, a puzzle. I don't envy Michael Malone and the coaching staff, actually, because this is a really, really tough task to try to figure out how to make all of these disparate pieces fit together. The reward is often amazing. Like we said, like we've talked about on the show before, there are so many lineups that have shown themselves to be, at least in the regular season, incredibly potent, that we kind of stumbled across. And like you said, Malone has been experimenting more, and I think he's going to continue to, because he's going to have to, because this team is so kind of kooky.
Yeah, he's got a tough job. He's definitely got a tough job. Aside from the starters, I think that there's a lot of question marks as far as who's going to play in the playoffs. And I think that even extends. I think Russ is also in that mix as well, despite his fans being in my mentions every day. But I think, he's got a lot of questions, Malone, that he needs to answer as far as the bench is concerned in the playoffs, because last year they only went 6 deep. This year, I don't know. Go more than 6 guys. If you can play like a Watson or a Russ, if you can. Julian is obviously a big question mark as well. And I think that's an issue where the Nuggets had lineup versatility in 2023 in the finals, extended from the starters with Bruce. Now that guy as the 6th guy is a question mark. I don't know who it's going to be, but I think hopefully Watson comes back sooner than later, because I think he actually needs to see.
We need to reintegrate him into the rotation and figure out stuff that works around him as well. That's going to be very interesting, because he's not like, in 2023, I think Jeff Green got injured maybe around the same time. And like you said, Zeke was playing well with Vlatko around that time. And then when Jeff re-entered the rotation, he kind of like took those minutes back. But Jeff was also a player that it was easy to, he's just like your 5th guy. He knows how to get out of the way and like just, do whatever. or at least not mess stuff up, right? With Peyton, I think that there has to be more intentionality, and so I'm also hoping that he comes back sooner rather than later because time is ticking. I think there are only like 25 games left in the season. Looking at the number 26 games left. 27. Yeah, so that is definitely, we only have so much time to figure out what works, especially against good teams. And this would be a really good stretch to have Peyton in, not just to help us beat these teams, which would be nice, but also to figure out how to best optimize him to be part of the team's best punch.
Right.
All right. So we talked a lot about backup center. The other position in respect to this roster that really has caused a lot of consternation this whole season in a variety of ways is starting shooting guard and shooting guard in general, which is funny because obviously having KCP just kind of help to forego any conversation of like who's your fifth guy that's going to take up like those fifth most minutes at that spot, particularly shooting guard and taking on those duties, right? And it's been this ongoing dialogue where about is Christian going to be good enough to be a starter on a championship caliber team? Should Russ be starting? Should it even be over Christian, or should he be starting over somebody else? Do we need more defense from that position than Julian is providing off the bench? Do we need more offense from that position than potentially Peyton Watson provides off the bench? Should Peyton Watson be considered a shooting guard? Like that particular position has really been the center of like the 90%, I would say, of the conversation around this roster this season. And it's really because KCP gone, left a void, and now we have to figure out how to fill it. Now, how would you assess Malone's choice of first the fifth starter, particularly when everybody's healthy, because that has happened pretty rarely this season. It's still not true now with Peyton out. And then two, each of the different players I just talked about, Christian, Russ, Julian, and even Peyton, their abilities to take advantage of the opportunities they've been given to be that fifth guy and complement the core, right?
I think, I've been a Christian Brown advocate for a while, especially, dating back to the draft. That was pretty,
Yeah.
at the time. I think he's filled in admirably this year. I'm in favor of him being the starter as the fifth guy. I just think what his skill set is and what he brings to the table as far as a slasher, cutter, good rebounder. He's got good size for a two guard, dynamic athlete as well. I just think that's needed around Murray, Porter, and Jokic. So I think with that fifth slot, I think Malone has done a great job of putting CB in a position to start and play really well. And he's going to get paid. He's going to get paid for it as well at the end of this year. Julian has started a good amount of games as far as when there was a lot of injuries, which was a pretty good experience for him as well. Payne started for AG a lot when he was out earlier in the year. I would like to see Payne play a little bit more two guard in certain variations, not like as a starter, but I would like to see him play a little bit more in that role moving forward, as far as like another look you could throw at teams.
Yeah, it feels like Peyton has played. It's interesting with him because like offensively, I still don't really know what he is. He's shown flashes of, kind of being able to play the dunker spot a little bit, but the finishing through contact is dicey. Sometimes being able to create off the bounce like a 2 or 3, but other times you're like, why are we letting him dribble the ball? Sometimes even playing point a little bit, but then, same conversation about like, stop letting Peyton dribble the ball. And even playing some backup 5 in very limited stints where Malone just wanted to go throw out a just totally different look with Peyton out there, either guarding the center or being the main help defender. So like with him, I don't even know that the conversation is about like, what position is he actually is that important. It's more about like how good can he be in these different versatile roles. Like can he establish a certain floor doing each of those things, do a little bit of everything? Because that's where he gets to the level of like, okay, your floor is like a poor man's Bruce Brown, particularly on offense, right? Because I think defensively, he's shown himself for most of the season to play at a really high level, playing lots of different roles defensively. There's the knock on the defensive rebounding, which is like, it is what it is. Like, it's not like we have outside of really Yoke, DJ, and PJ, no other high level defensive rebounders on this team. Even guys for their position, which we kind of expected a little bit more of from like Christian, who actually he had a really good rebounding game yesterday against the Pacers. But so that's not even like a knock for me. It's more like, okay, can you like guard this position? I think Peyton has shown his an ability to guard basically every position at a high level at times. Sometimes with like the smaller guards, that's like a bigger issue really than the bigger wings. And I think he's done a pretty good job on those guys as well. And been, I've said this on the show like so many times, like his versatility has been key in like every one of my favorite defensive wins this season, dating all the way back to, he had a really slow start to the season because he was coming back from the injury that he sustained in training camp, right? And I think one of the first like great defensive games we saw from him was that one versus Dallas, where I didn't really notice him throughout most of the games. I wasn't paying attention to who he was guarding, but I guess he wasn't really like getting cooked. Then in the second half of the game, Malone puts him on Kyrie, and he finally shuts Kyrie down, who was having an amazing game. Peyton was kind of the only one who could kind of get around the screens and bother him with the length and all of that stuff. And that was one. Definitely the Spurs games against Wemby. And the second one we ended up winning because Malone played him 22 straight minutes in that game as well. And he's just had really good moments. I mean, the one against OKC where he gets the game-saving block on SGA, in a help position too, right? And he had the great game against the Orlando Magic. So he's shown himself to be able to do a variety of things really well defensively. And the question's really about the offense. So I'm really curious about how we're going to reintegrate him in that way. If he could end up being like basically what Zeke's been on offense, then he can stay on the floor apparently, because Zeke has been able to stay on the floor playing the 4 position or like whatever, right? Like who just go guard this guy. Was there anything else that you wanted to say about Russ in particular and how he's taken advantage of his opportunity in that 5th starter role?
So the Russ discussion is interesting. Anytime I've tweeted about Russ, I've had a lot of people in my mentions, for whatever reason it is. I think Russ has worked particularly well with Murray and MPJ and Jokic at the 4-5. And I think there's a reason for that, because MPJ and Jokic have been such good spacers this year as far as their 3-point percentage, on having teams pay as, putting your slower front court players on them. And MPJ has been able to attack closeouts. He's been able to, obviously, shooting at a great clip this year at 41%. And Jokic is one of the best shooters statistically in the league this year. I think that's really opened up the floor for Russ to be able to operate in the pick and roll with Jokic, or he's been able to operate as a cutter, as a slasher as well. Obviously, his transition game is always still really good. I think, unfortunately, what we're seeing now is I think teams have been game planning for Russ in the Jokic pick and roll lately, ever since the break, I think. Teams are playing the pass. We saw that the other night
for sure
against the in their last game against the Pacers too. Teams are just game planning for the pass because they don't think Russ is going to be able to score at the rim.
Yeah.
When he gets into the paint, which he should. He should honestly start going up for more layups despite even trying to miss, because Jokic will get the offensive rebound and put it back up. I've liked Russ in that role at times, and I think it's curious because Malone hasn't gone back to that lineup at all.
The one with basically MPJ at the 4, like no AG.
Correct. Yeah. Okay. And I don't understand why. That's one of my not a gripe with Malone, but it's something that I question, is because like he has these lineups that he finds right when players get injured. And he doesn't go back to them once everybody's back. Like, I would like to see Russ at the 2 next to Jamal with MPJ and Jokic at the 4-5 at times. I think that'd be another lineup that statistically has done really well. That Strawder point guard lineup in the beginning of the year. I would like to see it again just to see how it fares. You know what I mean? And kind of see that versatility and see how that operates. But
I think that there are a lot of things to juggle with the rotation, right?
Yep.
And one of the things that I think it's been pretty, maybe you've noticed it too, but I think pretty obvious since AG has been back in the starting lineup is Malone's been really trying to get him a lot of minutes with Jokic.
Right.
A lot of his minutes are coming with Jokic, and I think they're just trying to reintegrate that chemistry too. So that's part of it. The other one is making sure, unless it's literal like foul trouble like there was yesterday, that in the non-Jokic minutes Jamal is on the floor, and so you can't play him like literally all of those. For
Right.
example, let me share a lineup with you, and I want you to guess the offensive rating. You got Russ, AG, Christian, MPJ, and Jokic. Got 250 possessions.
Russ, CB, MPJ, AG, Yoke.
That lineup has a 130 offensive rating.
Wow.
So one of the things that does jump out of like all the offensive four factors are in the like 90th plus percentile, like 95th plus percentile, except turnover rate, as you would expect. But they are, 95th percentile EFG and like all the other things. Offensive rebounding is off the charts for that group, as you would expect from it's Russ, who's a great offensive rebounder for a guard, and like everyone else is like huge for their position, right? They're rebounding almost 40% of their makes, or sorry, their misses, but they're also good on the first shot offense because the EFG is so high with this group. And it's not a small sample size. I mean, that's about half of the most played lineup, half as many possessions as the most played lineup. Maybe like Malone has access to this data as well, right? This lineup is sometimes like MPJ's not on the floor for this lineup. It's like Julian is just he's on a struggle bus, right? Right. I think if you took that lineup and made it Julian instead of MPJ, I don't even know if we have played that. That's good. 'Cause often when you sub out MPJ for Julian, things decline precipitously. But it's one of those things where you're like, okay, well, I guess there's enough passing, and yeah, they're turning the ball over a lot, but I guess they're getting back because the defensive rating it's one of our better defensive lineups as well.
Right.
And probably because if I scroll over here on cleaning the glass, they have a really good defensive rebounding rate. Yeah, I get it. There's lots of things that I still want them to try, but there's also only so many things that you can try when you're trying to just like get a coherent rotation in place and not chop up guys' minutes. Like that's another consideration as well. Making sure that guys can play longer than like 5 minute stints at a time for the most part. We're a very rhythm based team. I think it's one of the reasons that we're so bad on 3+ days rest. Like, I think the Nuggets are winning over 70% of their games when it's 0, 1, or 2 days rest, and then less than half when they have more rest than that. That was an interesting, digression on lineup data and how Russ actually fits into lineups with AG. I think we just honestly need more sample size with these things, and some of the stuff shocks me. You put Zeke with Jokic and you get a 130 offensive rating. I don't know, man. Like Jokic is the best player in the world. I don't know what else to tell you. If he's able to make some of these things work, but hopefully we can get some stuff that makes sense before the playoffs. All right, let's move on to Christian Brown, your favorite player. So we're going to talk about Christian Brown and his versatility offensively this season, because I do think that he's improved a lot defensively, both one-on-one and in pick and roll. And I think part of that has been just like improving his pick and roll chemistry with Jokic, like defensively. That was pretty evident actually in the game against the Pacers yesterday, how well the two of them can defend and pick and roll when they're both like locked in and high effort. A lot of more like hard blitzes from Jokic playing up at the level and giving CB a better chance at recovering.
Right.
And I think he gave Hallie some issues. I mean, you look at the box score, and I think he had like 19 points, like 15 assists in that game, and like one turnover. When guarded by Christian, I thought he generally did a good job of stonewalling a few of those possessions in ways that wouldn't end up in the box score. But I do want to talk about his offensive versatility, because that was really the big concern both going into the season and at various parts throughout the season, even after it was evident that Christian's offensive game has leveled up a lot, due in large part to how good his finishing has been. CT actually did a really nice thread on Twitter yesterday about the two-man game between Jokic and Christian. Here, he kind of rejects the screen and is able to get downhill, finishes through contact. That I think that should have been an and one. Like, I did not understand the whistle in this game because the Pacers were just getting touch fouls, and I'm like, Christian's getting mauled like every time he goes into the paint.
Yeah, I think even for me, just dating back to his time at Kansas and seeing the fit with Jokic is, I was really honing in on more of a fit pick in that draft.
Mm.
And I thought, seeing CB and what he was able to take that leap as a junior, it wasn't only the shooting leap, but it was also his transition game. I thought that would kind of mesh well with Jokic. I thought he's a good passer on the move. He's a guy who's just very physical as far as getting downhill and trying to carve out space for himself. And a reason why I was kind of high this year on his fit as the fifth starter is that comparatively to KCP, if really just kind of looking at it now, of course, his numbers in Orlando are not great this year. KCP, if we're looking at it from a perspective of a general offensive player, is, I would say, overall, if we're going to grade him on a scale, is probably a middle of the pack to a poor offensive player. He does his shooting is an important component of what he does and brings to the table offensively, no doubt about it. He's a knockdown shooter, pretty good cutter as well. But with CB, I think you have, in a playoff context, I think we'll see it, this year for sure. As far as the shooting, maps out. But I do think with CB, he has more versatility as far as a downhill attacker, a good offensive rebounder, forceful cutter, and it's just the athleticism as a guy with a 40-inch vertical pairing him with Jokic. It's something that has always been the formula, I think, for high-level success, surrounding Jokic with athletes, guys who could competently defend and cut. And I think with CBs, we're seeing that now, is you can kind of give him the ball a little bit and let him freelance sometimes. He can
Actually. So
off DHOs and off cuts. And I think that, like, comparatively to KCP and in the Wolves series, what we saw is what obviously was their detriment. I think with CB now, he has more of a propensity and a capability to attack mismatches compared to KCP, where KCP is a guy who's just going to stand in the corner and kind of stay away from the action. I think CB, you can involve him in a lot more actions, assuming we have a properly spaced floor.
Right. And it helps to involve him because he's definitely one of the guys that would otherwise be ignored. So the fact that he can be more, integral, like involved in the action, is actually helpful given the spacing situation on the team. So this is one where CB actually misses the shot, but he's basically ISOing Halliburton, bullies him all the way to the rim, and then he misses the layup and then gets the rebound and is able to continue that possession. I don't remember how that possession ends, but like, he got really close to the basket here and had basically a layup. It is Halliburton, but that's the point, right? Having somebody who can attack mismatches in that way. It's not the first time that I've seen Christian, have this moment either attacking a closeout on a drive or just ISOing from the top of the key. He had this one really impressive one against Delano Banton. And that one got the crowd to their feet because he put him in a spin cycle and then got all the way to the rim there. And that was really nice to see. So I'm like, yes, this is what this team needs. Somebody who can just attack the rim off the bounce, particularly against bad defenders. I do think that there were times, even in the Lakers series last year, where they put D'Lo on Christian and he would try to do something and kind of get nowhere and got really tentative to either continue the attack or extend the advantage by getting the ball to somebody else. So that's, I still need to continue to see progression in that sense. And hopefully we can see it, just continue to look like it did, in this game in the playoffs against poor defenders, at least, right? Like, we're not asking him to ISO, Jaden McDaniel, right? I don't know why the Wolves would ever have Jaden on Christian anyway, unless he was roaming off of him. But that's one of the things is if he can be somebody that catches defenders who are ignoring him off guard, even off the bounce, that's another, that could be a nice dynamic. To your point about Christian as a vertical spacer, I have another clip in here of Christian as a screener in inverted pick and roll. This
Yep.
is not one of the ones where he catches a lob. Jokic like calls for him to
Yep.
screen, and CB's able to maintain his position on the roll really well. See how he repositions himself on the roll to make sure that Jokic can get that uh that he has the passing window there. Jokic still does a little adjustment to kind of lead him even further down the lane, but Christian was right there and could have received an even easier pass. So he's got really great positional awareness in that role as well. Another contrast that you could definitely talk about between Christian and KCP this year is the finishing. It's funny because, again, at the beginning of the season, I was worried about how bad Christian's finishing at the rim was last season. It was like KCP level. This year, obviously, there is a sizable gap, between the two because Christian has been one of the best finishers in the NBA this season, but he's able to position himself and places on the floor, both when he's directly involved in an action and when he's not. This is one of my favorite moments of the whole night. So,
Hmm.
Jamal off the DHO, Jokic pop, which actually allows even more space for Christian to cut. Jamal, he comes off of Christian's screen,
Hmm.
gets the handoff. Miles actually stays with him, but Hallie is supposed to take Jokic to prevent the pick and pop three that I guess that maybe that's why Jokic didn't take that many threes yesterday is because Indiana had scouted that. But then obviously Christian has a wide open cutting lane
Yep.
and he's able to finish. And Jamal, like if you're watching his eyes, he clocks that CB's open and maybe even signals to him to cut and then is able to deliver that pass. And I love seeing that because that gives you another option in these situations where maybe they want to try to run an empty side action, but those are pretty easy to guard 3-on-2 if there's no movement on the weak side.
Right.
But Christian cuts there and Jamal's able to deliver the pass, which makes it a lot easier to see how they're able to generate offense where uh Christian's going to be ignored as a quote unquote spacer,
Right.
but he's moving. If he's constantly moving to the open space, then, he's doing a good job there.
They just run split action here as well. Usually CB would cut to the rim after this. Once you can see like he would split, right into the middle right after he catches the ball. But I like how Jamal.
Halliburton's dropping way off of him.
Yep, I like how Jamal extends his dribble along the corner, and then you see CB with the 45 cut. CB's
Yeah.
a good 45 cutter when guys are going along the baseline, and he's able to either dunk it on you or just have a nice little layup. But actions like that, and this is what infuriated me about. I don't know if we'll get to it, but this is what infuriated me about the Lakers.
Yeah, I was going to ask. Like, I'll just ask the question real quick. CT, why didn't the Nuggets run any of this stuff against the Lakers on Saturday? Because none of it is predicated on getting Jokic the ball in the paint.
It was one game. People were melting down over it, and I think the Nuggets were wildly unprepared for that game. Unfortunately, and Malone is like a guy who's like prepared for every game. You know what I mean? And I think that game maybe they caught him off guard. But things like that, I just think the Nuggets have, people have always, especially this year, a lot of the time have criticized the Nuggets ancillary players other than Jokic. And I just think that a lot of these guys have versatility that you can put in lineups. Like you're running split action with CB and Jamal, and you have Mike in the corner, you have AG in the dunker spot. Like you have optionality and kind of different options you can go to. And I think CB offensively does give you more optionality than what KCP brings to the table. Defensively, I think KCP fills more of a role as a point of attack guy, and CB's had like a crash course as far as defending the best perimeter option each night. But I think that's only can get him better as the season goes on. But yeah, when it comes to the Lakers game, I mean, there was just so much wrong with that game. From an offensive standpoint, from a defensive standpoint, that was infuriating. And I think that just like I tweeted the other day too, like just putting Jokic in the post and like parking him there is just such a easy way to game plan against that defense that they incorporated of like, and the lineups too. Having Russ out there with CB and Gordon, like that was just a disaster lineup. And Hunter Tyson played somehow, which was funny. I just think that when it comes to that kind of scheme, I think the Nuggets can compensate for it a bit better than they have in the past.
Yeah, they just needed to come ready to play. And it's not like It's not like this game against Indiana was the first time they'd done this stuff even this season. Like, Jokic runs inverted pick and roll all the time. It almost felt like they were intentionally not doing any, like, they do this against nothing teams
Right.
too. Like, I think there were plenty of inverted possessions against the Blazers, who were kind of doing a little bit of the same thing as the Lakers were doing, but not as well, in both of those games that were part of the duplex, especially that second one. Because remember, in the first game, in February against the Blazers, Jokic like lit that team on fire, and in the second game, they were working their asses off to deny him and triple team him and all of that, and that's when Jamal went off, right? So I thought, like, why didn't we just do like a little bit more of that? It was too much of like trying to force feed Jokic against the Lakers. I'm like, can we just play basketball? And like, it felt like they were fighting the defense in a way that they really don't most of the time. So it was just a very weird game.
Yeah. I like how Jokic bounced back in that Pacers game as far as his mindset.
Yeah.
I took a backseat a bit more offensively and let, Mike had a good second half. AG was cooking in the
Or
first.
he was, I think he was more involved in initiation.
Right.
Right, because you saw even the Pacers decided to, like, fully crowd the paint when Jokic was driving, because he did run a lot of inverted pick and roll, and he did attack a lot, get downhill a lot in transition, and the Pacers would try to, like, not form a wall, but kind of swarm him before he could get to the rim, and even kinda stop him short so that he couldn't get to the floater as easily, and he was kicking out a lot and initiating drive and quick kick sequences that often ended up in a shot in the paint anyway, which is, yeah, I talked about this a little bit on my recent appearance on Serbian Corner. Is what I wanted to see them do against the Lakers instead of trying to attack the rim like on that first shot, like directly, because
Right.
they were ready for that, right? You didn't really make them work on those possessions like we did against the Pacers. Like, and it was easy because it's the Pacers, but like, I don't feel like the Lakers had to work all that hard defensively. Obviously did to like deny the ball and, maintain that kind of swarming zone that they were. But you didn't do anything to stress that defense. And I think that they did all the things that they would do to stress that defense in this Pacers game.
Right. Well, they didn't. They also let Luka and Reeves off the hook in that game. Nuggets are pretty good at targeting guys who are weak links. Putting them in
Yeah.
a role. Mike has gotten some good seals lately on guys who are smaller than him. AG can bully mismatches. I mean, CB has been great at that as
So
well.
MPJ was having another rough game for most of this game, really, and then he kind of turned it up in like the second half of the third quarter and the fourth. There's this one possession where he catches in the corner, and Benedict Mathurin closes out pretty hard. Uh, and MPJ just like bullies him under the basket
Yep.
and like just puts up a little like 4 foot kind of shot. And I was like, I don't think I've literally ever seen Mike do that before. Sometimes he'll try to like bully someone and he'll kind of get like 2 steps away from where he started and then take a step back jumper. But I've never seen him actually do that, get all the way to the basket and get like the easiest possible shot for him. So that was interesting because he was also like, I'm trying to break out of this slump. There was another possession, I think it was the very last basket he had, one from the clip of all of Jokic's assists that everyone's mad about because he takes 3 dribbles, but he drives all the way to the basket off of a handoff. And again, it's the Pacers, but like it's nice to see him just do that because that's the easiest possible shot. And he can dunk over guys because he is 6'10".
Yeah, I think Mike's in a little bit of a slump since he's been back. I think he's probably getting acclimated from the hamstring injury, so I think that kind of like messed up his rhythm a little bit. But he played better.
He actually talked in the post game about, he said he wished that he'd done more like conditioning over the break, even with the injury, just to like stay in better shape. So I think that he's probably feeling that a lot in game. So hopefully he gets back in, condition and like rhythm soon because we'd like to see more of the jump shots falling too. But also just like it was interesting because the second half of this game, he was like a completely different player. He was so indecisive for most of it. It was much like the other games that he's had after the break. So hopefully that fourth quarter kind of awakened, something in him and helped to at least bring about more decisiveness.
100%. Yeah, I hope so as well. Good to see he had 11 rebounds though. He's been a monster on the glass, which is
Yeah. He even took Jokic's 10th rebound at
yeah.
the end of the game.
We're not happy about that.
I don't actually even think Jokic was really in position for that board, to be honest. I was watching it and I'm like, oh, he's not standing in the right place. I guess Mike's going to get it. So this team, like you said, we have a lot of guys that can do a lot of different things when they are locked in and, part of the game plan and, really ready to go. Like this team they're not good at getting things easy because they're not a good like stand around and like watch the action kind of team. Like these guys are all athletic. They need to be involved in the action and there needs to be constant movement. So that's why in those low engagement games, you kind of see that floor of like, oh my gosh, why does the offense look like this? But obviously in a lot of games like we saw against the Pacers, even in a game where they had 20 turnovers, they managed to score over 120 points, which is kind of crazy. For our last segment here, this is going to be our two truths and a lie. I thought that CT, you and I could share two things that we were right about before the NBA season started, and one that you were egregiously wrong about. Any of the three things, whether it was a truth or a lie, has to be Nuggets related. So I thought we could go back and forth. I was going to start with the things that I got right about the season. The first one I was thinking about kind of goes back to our first news item. I was right about the Spurs and that they would end up tanking. Honestly, we got the news obviously about Wemby being out for the season. The West was just too deep. And like I said, they started their slide even before we got the news about Wemby kind of mid-January. They weren't, running quite as hot as they were. And now you've got some other teams in the West that have been, building themselves back up. Obviously not the Phoenix Suns, who, by the way, lost against the Grizzlies tonight. So, yay us, or not, because the Grizzlies are the 2 seed again. But the Warriors obviously are, and the Mavs have been better than the Spurs for the vast majority of this season, et cetera. So they were probably not even going to make the play-in. So that's my first one.
So, I think I was right about the Suns not being a playoff team. I think I predicted that before the year, that I just didn't think they were going to be a playoff squad. Or
like not even the play-in, or...
And I probably said around there, but I didn't think they were going to be like a surefire playoff regular team. I just didn't believe in the Beal. Yeah. Nurkic was there, and Mason Plumlee is still getting...
And they're even worse without Nurkic now. It's really crazy.
Yeah, that's...
I think... So Will and I did our grades, or no, we did like tiers, our team tiers. And Will had them lower than me. And I thought he was being too harsh, but I think he's going to end up being way more right than I was about the Phoenix Suns.
Yeah, our friend Peter is a known Booker and Suns hater. So.
Oh, yeah. Pete. My next one was that the Nuggets would be fine. They started the season pretty rough, I will say. But even before the season started, I said, hey, they have played at an above 50 win pace whenever Jokic and Jamal are healthy, and ever since they started making the playoffs in 2019. This season, they're currently on pace for 53 to 54 wins. That's assuming no overperformance or underperformance as the season goes on. So they're going to win above 50 games again. I do think that this team has definitely shown signs of having a lower floor than Nuggets teams of the past, but I don't think that they're going to dip below hey, can you win 50 games, get yourself in position to be, probably a top 4 seed, get home court in the first round, and then, just be in position and see what happens from there. Even when everybody was freaking out, I was like, they're going to figure this out, but it's going to be ugly. And basically that's what happened. I wasn't sure. I will say though, I will cop to dooming a little bit about I don't know if this team is going to make the playoffs, but it wasn't because I didn't think they would eventually turn things around, but because at the time it seemed like so many other teams were playing so well, because the Mavs, when they were healthy, were playing really well. The Rockets were surging. The Warriors were playing well at that time before they started their precipitous slide that they're trying to dig out of right now. And the Suns were okay, they were better than they are right now. So I was just worried about having to climb out of a hole, but it seems like the rest of the West has sort of melted down a little bit. And I don't mean that in the grand sense, but just like, and like ice cream cone, like, okay, we're getting a little bit, we're paring ourselves down and our core is being revealed with some of these teams as the Nuggets have, grown in strength and at least like resiliency as the season's gone on, right? Because you even take that Lakers loss on Saturday, and that could have been like, oh, wow, it's catastrophic. Like, we thought we were one team. Like Jokic said after the game, maybe we tricked ourselves with the win streak. And then it could have spiraled from there, but they didn't let it. They came back and they responded against Indiana. I don't know how the rest of this road trip is going to go, but I think it's a sign of a good, strong team when you don't let, losing streaks like go on and like fester.
No, I think you nailed it. That was a good. Those first two games were crash out moments for a lot of people.
The Thunder and the Clippers games, yeah.
Yeah. So that was it didn't look good, but then they bounced back pretty well. So that was well said. What was I right about? My Knicks as a top 3 seed.
Yes.
I think the Knicks actually have a good chance with Robinson coming back, because without another big, I think that's leaves Cat too vulnerable. And I think that last year, unfortunately, we were the victims of the Cat and another big lineup that
the Cat
time.
Big purr.
Oh, I got my victory lap one. I'll actually say it. Cade Cunningham being an all-star.
Oh my God, yeah. No, that's yours for sure.
Number 1 on the big board back in 20.
He might be all NBA.
He might be.
Honestly, especially with the games played requirements and a bunch of guys not qualifying.
Scrap my Knicks take. Cade Cunningham, finally an all-star, might be all NBA. Number 1 on the big board in 2021. Shout out to our friend Matt Brooks.
Yeah, we should send him that clip. Let's get to where I was wrong. I was egregiously wrong about how much better defensively the Oklahoma City Thunder would be. I think I even said at one point over the summer, quote, what are they going to do? Get even more steals? If you see here at the top of this chart, it's a graphic from NBAvisuals.com on their court sketch program created by Gabe Guzman. He's great. Check out his Twitter page. He does a lot with visualizations at Gabe Left Brain, basically showing the difference in, I believe it's steals per game difference between last season and this season for every team. And as you can see, OKC, I mean, I actually thought they were at the top of the league last year, but it turns out they were not. Looks like that was the Sixers. They were still high up there. And now they're just by far getting more steals than anybody else. That has helped contribute to their generational defense, right? That everybody loves to talk about. And yeah, I thought, okay, yeah, Hartenstein's going to help them with rim protection, like even more. Like he'll help them with rebounding probably. But I thought the Caruso ad was like very redundant. It turns out having even more guys who can generate tons of steals. They haven't hit that limit yet where it kind of plateaus in its impact on the defense. So that was one I was totally wrong about. I didn't want people to underestimate how good Oklahoma City was last season. I think they were awesome, right? Especially defensively. And we saw that even in the playoffs, like the defensive end really wasn't their main issue. But this year they've leaned so far into that strength that it's like, I don't even know if you can really exploit them enough to make up for how good they are at that. And it's not their defense isn't just about generating steals. Like they are also the best rim protecting team in the league, really good at protecting the paint. They sell out on threes to do it, but they also contest like more shots than anybody. So it's not like you're getting open looks. But yeah, I was wrong. They could be that much better defensively, and that's where they are now. And it's really annoying.
It is. I'm looking forward to the matchups though coming up with the Nuggets. Unfortunately, it's back-to-back games, so it could get ugly or it could be good. We don't know. But yeah, the Thunder have been defensive juggernaut this year, and it's been a scary sight to see. But again, I still have some questions come playoff time.
All right, CT, what were you wrong about?
For the Nuggets, I'll say I predicted them to be the 1 seed, I think, before the year. And again, like they're going against a really good regular season Thunder team. So it's like, I'm not going to hold the L that badly on that one. But I did think the Nuggets this year could have been better. I thought Jokic would have he did take a leap, but I just thought it would be, Murray would be playing better. He's playing better now, but the beginning of the year obviously was rough. MPJ, I think, has been pretty steady most of the year, other than a couple games here and there.
Mhm.
Age 3, so I mean that's been tough as well. But yeah, I thought the Nuggets maybe had a chance at being the 1 seed over OKC, and um, there's still a chance, but it's it's very
I mean, Jamal Murray said that they're going after the 1 seed, and I busted out laughing. This was in the Charlotte Hornets post game, and then they proceeded to lay an egg against the Lakers. So that was really funny. But it doesn't really matter because they were 9 games behind the Thunder. I just thought that was very funny. Yeah, it's funny because there were definitely, some touch and go type losses, but it doesn't seem like there are a lot of those wow, close loss if that had gone like the other way slightly this season as much as last year.
right.
Maybe because we're just blowing more teams out, but I feel like for the most part, the games that we lost handily. They
Embarrassing.
weren't like, oh, we should have won that with the way that we played. Like the Blazers game was probably obviously like we should have played better in the Wizards game. The Blazers game was the one where I'm like, that game shouldn't have even been close because they were getting blown out before that fourth quarter anyway. So it's one of those things where I'm just kind of like, the team has kind of I think I don't feel as much like FOMO about these losses, about as many losses this year as I did last year.
Right.
And that's not necessarily a good thing because some of these losses haven't been close.
Yeah, it's been they've had a couple of embarrassing losses, especially the Wizards game. The Blazers game I thought was embarrassing too. There's been a couple of those,
Could have been more embarrassing, CT. It could have been a blowout.
but that Wizards game was something. Their floor, like we said, has been a lot lower than in the past 2 years for sure. But I do think when they're on, they look pretty formidable. I think I think the record thing against the over 500 teams or playoff teams is definitely a data point for sure. But it's something that I'm not really too concerned about until we get to the playoffs.
Well, speaking of their record, before we get to the outro, just wanted to get your quick thoughts on the next few games as they go on this road trip. And then there's a couple of home games before they play OKC. So I'll just fire off a game and you tell me if it's going to be a win or a loss. At Milwaukee.
I'm gonna go win.
Okay. I've actually got that as a toss up because it's the Nuggets on 3 days rest.
Right.
Literally, that's it. I think they can win it. I don't think Milwaukee's that good. I think they're beatable. At Detroit.
Detroit's playing really well right now.
They are. I think they've got the Cavs have the longest win streak in the NBA. The Pistons have the second longest. They've won 7 in a row.
I'm gonna say win for that one too.
Yeah, they're only slightly above 500 at home. I think we should win it, but we'll be on a back-to-back, which we've been awesome at, but they can't keep getting away with it, as in the Nuggets, right?
Yep.
I feel like we're due. They're 10-1 in back-to-backs. The one loss was without Jokic against the Rockets at home, right? The Pistons are actually they have a better win percentage on 1 day's rest, which they'll have at that game than we do overall. But I actually think I think we have a better chance of winning Milwaukee than we do Detroit. I'll be surprised if they lost to Milwaukee and then actually if they lost to Milwaukee, they'll just play better and might just like beat Detroit because of the we gotta make up for it kind of energy. Oh, I have it as a toss up. Oh my god.
Don't jinx it.
You're right. I'm gonna say L. I do think the Pistons have been playing better. The last time that we played the Pistons, they had been playing really well, and we've done a good job of playing these like mid to bad teams that happen to be on a hot streak when they see us. We've done a really good job taking care of those games possible, but we're on the road. It's a weird time. I'm gonna go with L. All right, at Boston.
This is a game where I think the Nuggets actually match up decently still against the Celtics.
Yeah.
Famous quote of saying that CB and Peyton were the Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum of the Nuggets. So this will be
Or did he mean like he saw them matching up with Tatum and Brown?
legendary.
Though Christian's left hand has me thinking he's more like young Jaylen Brown than anyone really knows yet.
Yep. That's going to be a fun one, though. I'm looking forward to that game. I think, like I said, I think the Nuggets have some good matchups there, still. Jokic, obviously, I think is, tough matchup for the Celtics. I'm going to say a loss because I think this game is in the afternoon.
Is it?
I think
We've been bad on matinees this year.
so. That's why I'm going to go a loss.
Last year we were a wagon on matinee games. I don't know why, but we were killing in all of them until that Mavs game at the end of the year. We would have won. We would have like swept matinee games last season.
I'm going to go loss since it's an afternoon game.
I've also got it as a loss. I just think that Boston is in kind of their like, we've got to show them like they're gonna be like really intense about it. And I think that especially if the Nuggets lose to the Pistons, they're gonna show up with kind of pissed off energy at Boston as well. I'm gonna go with L. If they surprise me, then great. Okay, we have 2 games versus the Kings and the Suns. I've got those both down as W's.
Me too.
They should just take care of business. Like the Suns are substantially worse than they were last year. We should win that season series like handily. I think we're tied right now, or maybe no, we're up 2-1.
Almost Nugget and Zach LaVine.
Oh yeah. Oh my God. Another. We have to face LaVine again.
Yep.
Because we played him when he was still on the Bulls. At least we'll get to play the Bulls without LaVine one more time. All right. For the OKC back-to-back, I've got us winning the first one and losing the second one. I don't actually know which order they'll do it in, but I feel like they're going to split it in some way. It might be like we lose the first one and then we win on the second one because we're just like back-to-back freaks. But those are my thoughts.
I'll go loss win. But I think the Nuggets are due for a win in OKC.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 2, and I've got them 4 and 2. You're more optimistic than I am.
It's the coach in me.
No, that's good. Well, thank you so much, CT, for coming on the show. We really appreciate it. Is there anything that you'd like to plug for the people? I know you've been working on some things behind the scenes.
I have. Thanks for having me on. Appreciate you and Will having me back on the show. Always great to talk Nuggets and NBA with you guys and keep up the great work with the show. Yeah, I've got some draft stuff in the works. Got a big board coming out, first one of the year. I've been a bit lagging behind with the draft stuff just because I've been coaching.
Oh yeah, CT's coaching his the middle schoolers in the playoffs right now. So
hopefully
wish them luck.
Yep, appreciate it. But yeah, mainly just the draft stuff for now is kind of the forefront. Good draft this year, so I'm looking forward to putting out some content.
Yeah, we don't have any picks in this draft, unfortunately. I don't even think we have a second round pick in this draft. I wonder if they're going to try to, whatever. That's like way into the future. We need to focus on the team as it is right now.
Maybe an undrafted guy, but I think the main this draft is that you should hope for Cooper Flag and or Dylan Harper to go east.
Yeah, Dylan Harper looks really good. So does Cooper Flag. Cooper Flag, I absolutely need to go east.
Yeah, he needs to go east. Luckily, I've actually seen Harper play a couple times in person this year, scouting. So he's been great. And Ace Bailey's been pretty good too, but he's not the caliber of prospect that I think Harper and Flag are. But just hope those guys go to the other conference because there's too much talent in the West.
Well, just make a note of this. We're doing a whole show on the East versus West agenda because it's materializing again and it's getting on my nerves.
That'd be a fun show to tune into.
We might, you know what? We might have to invite somebody who covers an Eastern Conference team to come and defend themselves.
Who could you know that could do that? Matt Moore, maybe he would defend the East.
Maybe we get Lucas Kaplan back on. Yeah, who's also covering a tanking team.
Yeah, Lucas, good guy.
All right. Well, if you're still listening to this point, thank you very much. It also means that you like our content a whole lot. So please, if you do, remember to click that like button and also hit the subscribe button so that you can get notified of all of the episodes of our show and don't miss any of our content. Hit the notification bell as well. Leave us a review on Spotify, Apple Music, or Amazon Music. Follow us on socials. We've got all our links in the description. And always remember that winning is fun and losing absolutely sucks.